Hi, everybody, and welcome authors to Self-Publishing Insiders. I'm Jim Azevedo, and I lead marketing team here at Draft Digital. And today it is my pleasure to welcome all of you and our guest, Maddie Dalrymple, back to the show. Friend of the podcast, Maddie Dalrymple.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and you?
I am doing fabulous. So I'm just looking at people in the already leaving comments. Fun.
I know. They're so engaged, and they keep becoming more and more engaged, and we love that. We love our viewers. We love our authors. But I'm super excited about this topic today, Maddie, and you know that I am, because today, everybody, we're talking about serialization of your books, novels before publication. That's tied into building an author-reader journey. So before we get into that, let me tell you, if you don't know who Maddie Dalrymple is, Maddie Dalrymple is the author of the Lizzie Ballard thrillers and the Ad Kinnear suspense novels and suspense shorts. She is a member of International Thriller Writers and Sisters in Crime. As you may well know, Maddie also podcasts, she writes, she speaks, and she consults on the writing craft and the publishing voyage as the indie author. And she's a partner member of the Alliance of Independent Authors. So once again, Maddie, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you back.
It's lovely to be back.
So let me kind of set the stage here. Here's what we're going to be talking about today. In addition to serialization, I think it's so important, and we were talking about this backstage, but the whole reason we're talking about this is discoverability and differentiation for authors. It's a topic that's been top of mind going all the way back to the democratization of the publishing industry. It's the biggest challenge. How do I reach readers? How do I stand out in a sea of books that are being released every day and every year? And it goes without saying that today it's probably tougher now than it ever has been with this influx of AI slop. But what I've seen make a difference, and you guys, probably realize this too, is that where the indie authors have the advantage is humanizing your brand, being that human connection in the sea of slop. And how are these best-selling indie authors doing this? It comes with the engagement with your readers, your ability to connect, to have this authentic connection with your readers. And why is that engagement so important? Well, it comes down to, in a sense, ownership of those readers, because you're insulating yourselves from the whims of the algorithms of the Facebooks and the Amazons of the world. So you get to keep your connection with those readers. You get to keep those email addresses for your author newsletters. So beyond just the number of followers you've got a real platform that comes down to your ability to interact with your readers. So that was a long-winded way of just kind of setting the groundwork, setting the foundation of this conversation. Maddie, you're not a newbie to any of this. You've written 12 novels. You've got the captivating Ann Kinnear suspense novels and the gripping Lizzie Ballard thrillers. So why now? What prompted you to experiment with serializing the seventh? It's the seventh novel, right, in the Ann Kinnear series?
That's right. Yeah.
Why now? Like, why this experiment now?
Well, whenever I had heard about serialization, and I've even interviewed people who have done serial fiction for my podcast, but it was always in the context of people who are writing content as they were serializing it. And I thought that sounded fascinating, but terrifying, because I am definitely a plotter. And the idea of just starting out and not knowing where you were going with a story and that sharing it publicly was not something that I was comfortable with. So it was intriguing to me to hear about, but not something I was really interested in doing myself. And then sort of simultaneously, I was getting familiar with Substack. And I really started Substack kind of as just a checking off the box, because I talk a lot about how authors can build platforms, and I talk about, becoming a podcaster or a guest or speaker, and writing articles. And somewhere along the way, someone would always ask me about publishing content on platforms like Substack or Medium. And I was like, well, I hear many people are doing that. Sure, give it a try.
Yeah.
It's not really the answer I want to give, right? So I thought, well, I'm going to spin something up on Substack so I have the experience and I could actually speak from first person experience about that. And at the time, I was spinning up a new platform that was not so specific to writers, called From Expertise to Authority. And I thought that would be a perfect opportunity to try Substack out. And I really, really loved it. I love Substack. It was happening at the same time where I, as well as many other authors, were getting fed up with social media. I was really limiting my participation on social media. And I found this platform, Substack. It's like the thinking person's social media, the
Hmm.
longer form content. It's thoughtful content. The comments felt much more thoughtful. It felt much more collegial than any other platforms I had been on. It was the kind of platform where I, as a user, would see something and stop and like interact with it for a little bit and think about it for a little bit, as opposed to just the endless scroll. And so I got very excited about Substack for From Expertise to Authority. I actually started moving some of the content that previously I had published on my website, like um, podcast transcripts and summaries
Hmm.
from my website, to Substack. And at the same time, I was finishing up my seventh Ann Kinnear novel, and I thought this is going to be um, a very fun place to experiment with serialization with work I have already written. And so that was kind of why serialization and why Substack.
Okay. Well, I love how you've admitted that like you chose to do Substack without being an expert, without giving yourself like 7 months to figure out the
Yeah.
platform to really become expert at it. You just said, "Hey, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to do this." And sometimes that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, there are downsides, and we can talk about the downsides, but I think the um, the biggest downside of not doing that is analysis paralysis, and thinking
Oh,
if you just take one more online course or read one more best
totally.
practice, then then you'll be ready to give it a try, and that doesn't work either.
Yeah. Okay. And you already mentioned that you started with your manuscript was nearly complete when you decided
Yeah.
to do this. How far along were you?
Well, I had finished the manuscript. I had given it to my very first trusted reader, fellow crime fiction novelist Lisa Reagan, who is always so generous in reading, being the first reader of any of my novels. And
Hmm.
I had incorporated her input. And it was at the point where I would have started sending it to like my next round of beta readers. And so rather than doing that, I
Hmm.
decided that I would tap into the audience I was starting to develop through my other publications on Substack and use them basically as my beta reader pool.
Okay. Okay. Quick comment here from Layla Bell, who says, "Hey, I was just considering using serialization since I have a bit of community of followers, so this is fortuitous."
Good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty here. All right. I want to talk about Cadence. Now, how often did you release your new chapters?
So I release them daily.
Okay.
Um, I didn't feel as if I, as a reader, I know there's always a danger of assuming that your preference is the same as other people's preferences, but waiting for a week between chapters, which is what I think some people think of when they think of serialization, seemed
Yeah.
uh, bad. And it would have taken me almost a year to get the whole thing out, which is not what I had in mind. So I published a chapter a day. And my chapters are usually fairly short. They can go from very, very, the occasional very short chapter that's
Hmm.
only like 500 words or something like that, up to maybe 3,000 words. And so they felt like it was a good chunk for readers to absorb every day. I wasn't asking them to like set aside half a day, half an hour to
Okay.
read my installment for that day. So daily felt right to me. And the content was basically the chapter and then an author's note about that chapter. Or if I didn't really have anything to say specifically about that chapter, it would be about the book in general. So, for example, the novel takes place on a cruise ship and it's based on an actual cruise ship. And so some of those authors' notes were like, does anybody recognize which cruise ship this is?
Oh,
Things like
that's
that.
fun.
Yeah, it was very fun. Yeah, so that's how I picked the cadence for it.
How much planning went into that Cadence, Maddie? I mean, did you did you decide like, hey, this is going to take approximately this many days or this many weeks? And I'm trying to figure out like, did you have other marketing activities in your head as you were planning out that cadence and approximately how long the entire project would take you, so that you came to the conclusion that, I'm just throwing it out there, was it 45 days or something like that?
It was about 45 days. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just curious, like how much thought went into that as far as like this project in terms of the overall book launch plan?
Well, the timing turned out to be pretty good. Like 45 days felt about right to me
Mm-hmm.
because it was about the period of time I probably would have spent anyway soliciting beta reader feedback, absorbing it, incorporating it, and so on. The daily decision was very easy to make just because the timing was right, that it felt right both for my needs and for the reader's needs. But I did spend a ton of time. I mean, I do object, as many of us do, to AI generated slop. But I have to say that when working through business things, I do find AI invaluable. And I spent, I don't know, a day, 2 days just chatting with ChatGPT and saying, "Well, what if I do it this way? What if I do it this way? What if I include this content or not include this content? Where are the other places that I might want to be using this content that I would be precluding myself from using it if I do this?" And a lot of details, especially because I wasn't super familiar with the ins and outs of Substack,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of discussion about, like, is this a new profile? Is it a publication in my existing profile? What are the pros and cons of that? And so, and tiers, working through what the tiers would look like, the benefit tiers.
Oh, I
So
thought you meant tears of like
no, no, fortunately there weren't any
appreciation.
tiers. No tiers of that type, but
Okay.
the benefit tiers for people who supported was something that doesn't come naturally to me to figure out, and so it was invaluable to me to have this tool that I could chat through all that with, and that's how I created my eventual plan for the whole campaign.
Okay. Um, I want to take a step back because now I'm super curious about the on ramp to the project. So before you released chapter one, how much time did you give yourself to talk to your readers about this, to promote this serialization project on Substack, to just to get that reader interest to become involved and to go on this adventure with you?
Well, don't do what I did, because I did very little build up beyond. I had a 1 week series of posts that were like, here's what I'm doing. Here's how it works. Here's Anne Kinnear. Here's some of my other books. Here are what the tiers are. Like, I had 7 that were just kind of like laying the groundwork for it. And that was sort of my buildup. At that point, I already had some followers on From Expertise to Authority, that publication on Substack, and a growing presence on the Indie Author. So there was some cross pollination there, but I really wasn't positive of how it was going to go. So I wasn't promoting it very vigorously like I would if, for efforts going forward. I let my followers on social media know, and I let my email newsletter subscribers know, and I let the listeners of the Indie Author podcast know. So I was getting word out there pretty well, but I was really using it more as, like, the first one was an experiment.
Yeah. I just want to do a quick comment. I've seen some of the comments saying that my voice is really low, so I've tweaked my microphone here a bit, folks. So let me know if this is better. Hopefully that helps a little bit, and I'm leaning right toward the microphone now. So hopefully
Sounds good
that's a
to
little
me.
bit better. Sorry about that, everybody. Um, okay. So once your readers became involved or became aware of the project, how did you go about incentivizing them to join you?
So I'm going to switch over to something because I have to cheat in terms of the tiers I came up with. Um,
Okay.
but what I ended up with was, I set 4 levels of support. One would be free,
Okay.
one would be $10 a month. One would be $10 a month for the duration of the campaign, which was 2 months, and one was the annual. And we should talk a little bit about that because that was a bit odd.
Mm.
But for people who are not on Substack, you can put content out for free. You can put content up where a certain amount of it is free, and then you paywall it, and you have to be a paid supporter beyond that. And so those first 7 lead up posts and the first 7 chapters of the book were free for everyone to read. And I wanted to give people the first 7 chapters for free, hoping they would get hooked and decide they wanted to subscribe. And 7 chapters was great because I like that 1 week cadence. And it fortunately just ended on a good cliffhanger. If I ended the free access at 7, then for people who, even if they only subscribed for 1 month at $10 a month, and I picked $10 because this is another thing I debated with AI about, like the idea of, do I want to make it $9.99 or something like that? And I decided that no, $10 frames it more as, this is not framed as a bargain, it's framed as an experience. And so I like that idea of having sort of the round number for the monthly amount. If people subscribe for $10 for 1 month, they would get obviously all the chapters I was publishing, all the content. They would get an audiobook of my short story, Sea of Troubles, which, like Anne Kinnear Book 7, takes place on a cruise ship. They would get the ebook of the novel on publication. And then if they subscribe for the full campaign, being 2 months, they would also get a mention on the supporter page in the book, and they would get a coupon for a $5 discount on the print book when it published. And then the odd thing about Substack is that even if you're, oh, look, I'm almost unbearably loud by comparison. I'll back off a little bit. The odd thing about Substack is that you have to offer a yearly subscription. And Substack is
that's a requirement that you have to offer?
Like, I couldn't find a way around it. If somebody knows a way around it, let me know. But when you're setting up the publication, you have to say, if someone subscribes for a year, what will they pay? And so Substack is assuming that, $10 a month for 12 months, or get a yearly subscription for $100, for example. But it doesn't work if you're only planning on having a publication up for 2 months, as I was for Anne Kinnear 7. And so I did my best to flag everywhere I could that this was only going to be for 2 months. And so I didn't actually expect anybody to subscribe for a year. I ended up deciding to set it at $100 as kind of a signal that this is like not the bargain it would be.
Like, don't worry about it, you guys.
Be really above and beyond. But I did have people subscribe for $100. Yes. Nice. And so then I felt like I owed them some more stuff. So I added a signed print copy of the book as an offering for people who subscribed at that level.
Did you communicate with them and say, hey, I didn't expect you to sign up for this? Like,
yes. Well, right when the serialization started, I did a Substack Live with Gala Russ. She had heard I was doing a serialization. She said, oh, let's have a conversation at the very beginning, and then let's have another conversation at the end and find out how it goes. And so I was doing that first one, and I saw the person who was the $100 subscriber on the chat. And so I was describing this, like how difficult it was to frame up that this was different than it would be for an ongoing publication. And she said that she hadn't realized that at the beginning, but she was having so much fun. She was, she wasn't going to like ask for a refund or something like that. So nice. that was very cool. So working through, I think that the trickiest part was working through the tiers and then trying to figure out how to work around this yearly requirement. And the one thing that I felt Substack didn't do as good a job on is, unlike Patreon, where, if you're a user of Patreon, either as a supporter or a creator, you get a very clear, like, if you subscribe at this level, you get this thing. If you subscribe at this level, you get these things. If you subscribe at this level, you get these things. And I couldn't really find a way to do that on Substack. And so I ended up just creating that table and putting it as an image in my frequently asked questions and about pages.
Gotcha.
And I think that's what made it clearer to people. But I did have to do some like kludging in order to get that message out effectively.
Okay, I'm sure that communication has got to be like super, super clear with
Yeah.
those readers. You don't want any surprises and you want to set those expectations.
Yeah. And I think you also have to be ready to, if that person had wanted a refund, then I think the thing to do is just refund them without any questions.
Okay.
Not fight over those kinds of things, because you would end up sinking more pain and effort and time into it than I think would pay you off in the long run.
Okay, let me bring up a quick question from the audience. This one was posted a little earlier, again from Layla Bell, and I appreciate this question. She asked, is Patreon a good platform for serialization? Early access feels like a good patron benefit. Is there a reason why you went with Substack instead of Patreon?
Yeah, I did a pretty in-depth comparison of those two because
Mhm.
I actually am already on Patreon, so it wouldn't have been difficult to set up. But one thing I really liked, the reason I landed on Substack is that the reader experience, I think, is much nicer. So,
Hmm.
as someone who supports creators on Patreon, sometimes I'll get like a notice in my email box that says, "Oh, you have some stuff to read as a patron." And then I'll go sign over to Patreon. And then I realize I'm signed on in as a creator and not as a supporter. And then I have to sign out and sign
Okay.
back in. And then I have to fish around. It's just like not a good experience for me as a supporter. And whereas with Substack, people can read it on Substack, but I think a lot of people, it just goes to their mail. It shows up in their inbox and it's effortless for them to read it. And so I really chose Substack mainly for the user experience. I think it was more complicated for me as the creator than Patreon would have been, but the experience for the reader, I believe, is much nicer.
Okay, there you go, Layla Bell. That was a great answer. Another comment. This is from our own Lexi Green. She asked, "What are best practices for releasing your book for serialization without getting in trouble with Amazon for having the book, quote unquote, available online when you launch it as an ebook? Did you run into any issues there?"
No, I spent a lot of time talking with ChatGPT and Claude about this, and it's
Yeah.
it's not an issue. The only way it would be an issue is if you were republishing a book that was on Kindle Unlimited, that you had signed into KDP Select. And I've been especially researching this because, um, well, I'll tell you in a moment why I've been researching that, but I didn't find anything that suggested it would be a problem because it's not out there yet. It's pre-publication.
Hmm.
And so it's the same way if you were putting it up on NetGalley, I'd say. It's part of the editorial process that retailers expect you're going to be doing. So after a lot of research, I'm not a lawyer, but I did not find anything that suggested that doing that ahead of publishing it on platforms like um, Amazon or via Draft to Digital and so on would be problematic. I did spend more time. So I have now baked this pre-publication serialization just into my book launch plan. And in fact, I have my sixth Lizzie Ballard novel is going to be going up on Substack for serialization in the next month. And then I have two standalones that I just kept pushing back because, the
Hmm.
existing series were taking precedence. Those are both going to go up on Substack as serializations sequentially. And then I think that what I'm going to do is something that I've been meaning to do and have been putting off for years. And that is to go back to my very first book, the first Anne Kinnear suspense novel, The Sense of Death, and do like a polish pass on it as a serial. And I think, again, not a lawyer, but
That's an interesting idea.
from what I've been able to gather, again, if you're not on Kindle Unlimited or KDP Select, then you're in essence putting up a new product. The serialization is a product different than like a standalone ebook.
Hmm.
And so you're not really directly competing with the retailers. Um, and you're not going to get caught by a low price guarantee issue or price matching because the price is always going to be higher than someone would be paying for the ebook on the retail platforms. So again, I've been pushing it this every way I could. Well, what about this? What about this? And it looks to me like
Yeah.
it's okay, but if you're thinking about it, um, people might want to do their own research as well.
Yeah, good answer. Good, safe answer. Thanks for the
Yeah.
question, Lexi. Another question here, and I think you've covered this already, Maddie, or I know you have, but bringing it up again in case anybody joined late. I don't know if it's Keon Frost or Keon Frost, but thank you for this. When you started releasing your story in serialized pieces, was the book done, or are you working on it as you released it? And the reason I wanted to post that again is because I'm curious now to get into the questions where we start talking about the type of feedback that you received from your readers and whether it was worth it and how you solicited that feedback.
Yeah. So it was all done because I'm just not a person that would be comfortable committing to publish a book I hadn't
No one's going to
completely
knock
written
you
yet.
for that.
Yeah. Well, I just think that I think about people who are doing this, writing as they're publishing. And I recognize my brain doesn't work this way, but I think if I got, let's say, 20 chapters into the book and realized something was foundationally wrong,
Yeah.
as is often the case when I'm drafting a book, then I don't like the idea that I'm tied into that. Like if I suddenly think, oh, this person didn't commit the murder, this person committed the murder. Well, no, I'm sorry. Now you set everything up like person A committed the murder. And so I would never want to be in a position where I couldn't recover from that.
Yeah.
So yes, it was all done. It had been carefully edited. I think of the books I'm doing, this will be the one that will have gone to serialization most polished. And I was very explicit when I was posting these, like in every author's note, I would say, as always, I'm looking for your thoughts about this. In some cases, I asked specific questions. And one question I always have as the author of a series is, if you are coming to book 7 from book 6, is the backstory like overwhelming?
Okay.
And if you're new to the series, is it sufficient? Because I think for series writers, that's the most difficult thing. If you can't rely on people having read through a series sequentially, how do you orient the new people without boring the fans of the series? And that was very useful because I
That's an
had both.
excellent point.
Yeah, I had both those people there, and I could say, like, what do you think? Too much, too little, just right? And that was in the early chapters, that was really my focus. Was I providing the right amount of information? And then sometimes I would just say, like, what's your favorite part about this character? What's your least favorite part about this character? And as this one is a mystery, and what was super fun was to say to people, like, who do you think done it at this point? Like, what do you think is going on? And it was so instructive to hear what people had to say about, like, oh, I'm kind of suspecting this person, but I don't know because of this other thing. And people were reading so carefully. Like they would go back to chapters like a week before and say, oh, but I remember you mentioned this one thing in a chapter 7 days ago. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, how do you even how do you remember that? I barely
That
remember
sounds
that
super
sometimes.
valuable.
It was super, super valuable. And I don't know of any other way you can get editorial input at that level. Because even as someone who's engaged, a professional editor, you usually get like, you spelled this word wrong on page 7. And in the overall book, like the arc strikes me in this way. But I don't know any other way you can get a chapter by chapter reader input the way you can with serialization.
Yeah, I remember that was one of the key things. I cheated yesterday, everybody, because I listened to the podcast with Maddie Dalrymple and our good friend and colleague Mark Leslie Lefebvre yesterday. And that was one of the points where I stopped the interview and I rewinded it and I listened to that part again and again and again because you mentioned with Mark that you're like, hey, this feedback just goes beyond what editors and proofreaders can typically provide.
Yeah.
And these readers, you can solicit this type of feedback that really helps to inform the story and the direction of the story.
Yeah. And I think that that's another thing. Expectation setting was very important. So I think that sometimes when people are serializing as they're writing, then they're really throwing it open to the readers and saying, hey, I'm going to be asking you which character do you want me to spend more time with? Like, do you like this setting, or should we move it to a different setting?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to be very careful and say, like, the story is pretty much in place. And I'm looking to you guys to offer input, but I can't guarantee that I'm going to act on it. I mean, I don't think we should ever commit to acting literally on the input that we get from beta readers. But it would be a different experience for them than if they were on a writing as we go kind of serialization.
Yeah, that expectation setting sounds like it's something that should be up front from the very
Yeah.
beginning of the project.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to that in a second, but another question here from the audience from Peter Brickwood. And Peter, I hope that you can hear me better now. And this is a great question, so thank you for this. Peter asks, what is the longest practical length for a serialized chapter when you post it on Substack?
I think it very much depends on the genre, the cadence. Like, I think if you were writing the sort of story that, like, let's say literary fiction, where I think that the chapters would generally be longer, maybe fantasy. If you're writing chapters where the standard is just longer chapters than what I described for myself, then weekly might be better, or every 3 days, or whatever cadence you decide, because you kind of have to think, if people want to stay up with this and you're asking them to invest a certain amount of time every time an episode or an installment drops, how much of a time commitment are you asking for them? Like, for me, it was, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. If it's going to take somebody half an hour to read a chapter, then maybe you can't really ask them to do that every day. So I think it depends on what the reader's expectations of that genre are, and the expectations you're setting with them when you start out.
Okay. I'm going to jump ahead in my questions here selfishly, because I want to make sure I get to this question. And it has to do with setting your expectations, Maddie. Like, what were your expectations going into this, and what were you hoping to get out of it? What I mean specifically by that, were you hoping to make a little bit of money from this process, or were you hoping to dramatically increase your number of followers, or were you looking to simply create a way to interact with your readers, maybe to solidify that connection that you had with your readers? And did it pan out for you?
Yeah, I think that there was a little bit of each of those. I mean, I have to say that one of my goals was that this novel will be the first novel where I haven't had a full editorial pass by a professional editor. I sort of went down this route because of advice from my friend Michael Laron. We had a conversation in some forum, maybe on my podcast, where we were talking about where authors invest their money. And we had a whole conversation about developmental editing.
Yep.
And I said that even after, 12 novels, I was still having a developmental edit done because I was looking for someone to say, some informed, educated, professional third party to say, like, I don't quite buy the villain's motivation, or the book seems to be sagging a little bit in the middle. And Michael said that he actually invested more time and money in getting later edits done, like proofreads or copyrights, as I recall. And so I started thinking about this idea of, if you've done it 12 times, like, do you still need that same level of editorial help? And I'm always hesitant to say this because I never want the message to be interpreted as it's not important for us to get editorial input, because it absolutely is.
Sure.
But I did feel like I had gotten to the point where, with my trusted first reader, Lisa Reagan, and if I could add another layer of reader input that would give me that level of detail, I could perhaps honestly save the money of a full dev edit. And so there were financial incentives, but it was more money saving than it was money earning. And I kind of hope that in general, I would be compensated for the time I was spending on managing the serial, which wasn't terrible, but it did take a certain amount of time. I definitely like the idea of having some direct contact with readers, because I think, as with podcasts, for example, like, you put this content out there and you're like, I wonder if there's anybody on the other side.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, looking at download numbers or looking at, royalty reports or whatever, theoretically, that's telling you that there are people out there who are interested in consuming your content, but it's sort of scientific and, it's not very warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
And so I was really hoping to get that more direct connection with the readers, and to learn from their reactions to the story about where I could improve it.
Okay. Obviously, something worked for you, Maddie, because earlier you said that you're incorporating this into your future book launches.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I had no idea, I was sort of preparing myself for what if people like write really rude things. And I've been pretty fortunate. Very rarely, even on social media, have I had the experience of having people be really like nasty on social media to me.
No, people weren't like that. Come on.
There are always a couple out there. And this is really laying yourself bare. I mean, I think that this is something that people have to really consider when they're considering serialization is, are you willing to, first of all, maybe get rough critique, and second of all, not to argue about it. Like, I'd say that's a rule. You can't argue about it. Like, I remember years ago talking with someone, they were commenting on an acquisition editor's reaction to their book, and he said, they said they didn't, they were on page 10 or whatever. They didn't really understand why the character was behaving in this way. And he said, I explained to them such and such. And I'm like, you're not going to be sitting next to every reader saying, let me just explain to you what's going on by page 10. No, if the book isn't doing the work, then, then you can't argue with the input. You just have to absorb the input and then decide what to do with it, not necessarily act on it. But you have to be prepared potentially to get, maybe awkwardly phrased critical input.
Yeah.
And I was very, very fortunate that I did not encounter that at all. And the times where someone would say something like, oh, I think you should do such and such. And it wasn't, I knew for other reasons it was not what I wanted to do. I didn't argue. I just said, thank you. I really appreciate that perspective. That's so helpful. But yeah, the input was fantastic. And I think that is both, I was lucky, and because I was creating an environment that encouraged that kind of response.
Yeah, that's really good advice too, because you always have to kind of keep it neutral and positive.
Yeah.
And we've said it here on this podcast a million times, but you really never know who you're interacting with, especially in a public-facing forum, online, even if there's a subscription involved, or when you go to a conference, because that person in the elevator with you, if you're being, negative Nilly out there, you don't know if that is an editor or a publisher or an agent or a future reader. I mean, all of these people, this is such a word of mouth industry, and every single person that you come in contact with could potentially open doors for you. So always keep that positivity flowing. I know it's hard sometimes, but keep it positive. Let's bring up another question from the audience here, Maddie. This one's from Linda French. Hi, Linda. She asks, why am I having such a hard time saying serialized? Should the serialized chapters end in cliffhangers?
Well, I think that if they would end in cliffhangers in the book, then they should. I mean, as someone who writes suspense, mystery, and thriller, then I always try to end a chapter in a propulsive way that will encourage people to read on to the next chapter. And so that's how most of my installments of my serialization read. I was not doing something different for the serial. I was just publishing chapters written as they would be presented in the book. I can imagine there would be other serializations like, more kind of memoir-esque serializations where cliffhanger isn't what the reader expectation is. So again, I think it's about meeting reader expectations. And also, I guess this brings up the question of, is the result of the serialization basically going to be the book? Like, this was very explicitly like, here's the next chapter as it will appear in the book. But I can also imagine people would take a slightly different spin on it. And maybe they, I don't know, add more dialogue or less dialogue, or maybe they include little author's notes within it. Like, you have to decide up front to what extent this is a faithful representation of what the book will look like eventually, or if this is really kind of like a different product.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit about any missteps that you might have had with Substack? I know that you weren't an expert with it, but is there anything like for the next book launch? What would you do differently? Like, what did you learn that you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do it differently this time.
I think that the only well, one is a very small one, but so I had set it up so that each post was the chapter number, a little
Hmm.
sometimes there'd be like a little introductory thing, like, be sure to watch out for this in this chapter. I would have a
Okay.
picture that was sort of associated with the chapter. I would have the chapter, then I'd have the author's notes.
Okay.
And honestly, some days I spent more time looking on Deposit Photo and Shutterstock for a picture I could
Oh,
use.
really?
Because initially I thought, because this was based on a ship I'd actually been on, I thought, oh, I'll just use like pictures from the ship. And then I realized I hardly ever take pictures. I'm married to a photographer, so I can just rely on him taking all the pictures. And I had to go look for pictures to accompany each chapter, and it was just very time consuming. So if I were doing it again, I would think through in advance what kind of pictures I was going to use and decide whether I was going to commit to that or not. I asked my readers, and my husband, the photographer, thought I should continue using images, and some of my readers said they didn't care. That was a very small one, but the things that I learned were more things I didn't realize. So if anyone knows Substack, I'm going to sound like an idiot, but I was like almost done with the serialization when I discovered Substack notes. Like, I think this is like a pretty basic function of Substack, but I had just like I had seen them as a consumer. I didn't know what they were. I didn't realize they were different than articles, and so I thought, oh yeah, I should have been doing that. Um, but
That's okay.
yeah,
We're all learning together, Maddie.
yes, we're all learning together, and it's not like I think it would have like swayed things one way or the other, but I probably would have used it to do like little teasers, like
Hmm.
post little teasers, little excerpts from a chapter that would lead people back to that work. But no, it was more like very, very nitty things. I didn't really have any big ahas other than the idea that I did want to try to use it for this glow up of my first novel, which was not something that was on my radar when I started this.
Okay. Okay. After the last chapter dropped, you left some buffer time so subscribers kind of got their money's worth. Can you tell us how you utilized that extra time? And did you leave that buffer time in there by design, or is that just kind of how it played out?
Yeah, that was actually the other tricky thing about using Substack is that I I was very explicit to people that if they stuck around for the full campaign, they would not pay for more than 2 months, so not
Okay.
pay more than $20. And so I had to be very careful not to go over, not to hit anybody's um, trigger date that would trigger a third payment.
Mm,
So I had to say, like the very first person who subscribed, then I could go like 2 30-day um, billing cycles,
okay.
and I'd say I have to wrap this up by this date, or people will get double billed, and that was my plan. And then the conversation I had with Mark Lefebvre about it, I think happened on the day that the last chapter dropped. Or I think maybe I had started publishing some of the follow-up things. Like I knew I was going to have some follow-up because there were about 45 chapters. I had done the 7-day lead up. And so whatever the math is, I had about a week at the end that I could continue publishing posts without violating this 2 billing cycle rule.
Okay.
But then Mark was talking about it, so I thought, well, I don't want to just close down the campaign and not let anyone else join if they're interested. So what I ended up doing, which was a little kludgy, is that I went through it. Everybody who had been subscribed basically since the beginning
Hmm.
or had already made a payment, I comped them lifetime access to that publication. So they would never get charged again. Whatever they had paid at that point was done, but it didn't keep new people from coming in and also signing up. Now, the downside is that as long as that's still active, I would have to keep monitoring, like, what's the earliest date that the paid subscriber is, and then I have to comp them before they've paid for a third billing
Gotcha.
cycle. Again, if anyone knows more about Substack and can figure out a way around this, that would be great. But I did want to do it so that like my foundational rules were people can't pay more than I told them would be the maximum amount. And they need to be able to, the people who've paid need to be able to go back and read the material later if they just don't get to it until later, if they just feel like they want to go back to it for whatever reason.
Okay, gotcha. And at the end of and that last week there, you provided them some additional value. Like, wasn't there a title reveal?
Yeah.
And did you do a cover reveal as well?
Yes, I did. I did.
That's super exciting because they were involved in the project
Yeah.
the entire time, and they get to see. Did they help you choose what title it was going to be?
Well, I had been going back and forth so long. So all my Ann novels and most of the suspense shorts are all based on Shakespeare quotes. And I really regretted that I had used Sea of Troubles for this short story because it would have been the perfect title for the novel. But that was water under the bridge. And so I had winnowed down to like 3 or 4 Shakespeare quotes that kind of fit, like both provided a viable book title and kind of fit with the theme. And so I was talking to a fellow author, and I told him what I thought I had decided. And he was like, you don't want to do that. No. And I ended up using that title. I'm someone who named one of her books, A Furnace for Your Foe. So obviously I'm not picking titles that are like, would rank high in a marketing survey. And so the title of the book is Something Rich and Strange, which is a Shakespeare quote that ties very nicely to the theme of the book. And this is why I do speaking and consulting and write nonfiction books, so that I can do things like name my novels bizarre things that will be difficult for people to remember. But yes, I was sort of soliciting ideas and saying, like, if you guys can come up with a Shakespeare quote, I would be very grateful.
Maddie, we're almost near time, but I want to ask you, what surprised you the most about the process? And if I heard this correctly while you were during your podcast with Mark Leslie Lefebvre, I thought that you mentioned that the amount of new readers coming in was actually more than the readers. Like, you had more new followers come in than your existing readers. I'm like, and I thought, wow, that's. I would think that the readers who are already indebted to the series would be like, oh, I totally want to be involved with this. So did that happen? Did you actually attract more new followers?
Yeah, I actually have to say in full transparency that I was surprised that more of my current newsletter subscribers didn't subscribe, in part because I thought it was a pretty good deal in the sense that they could wait and get the eventual book for $6.99, which is what it would sell for, or they could support me for a month for $10. They would get the book and they would get like the fun entertainment value of being there. And I don't know if I didn't do a good job of presenting it. One thing I can imagine is that if people see that it's being serialized on Substack and they're not Substack readers, they might just kind of skip past it because they don't realize that they don't have to go to Substack to read it. Those are some of the things that I would work on to try to make sure that messaging was crystal clear about the options for consuming the content. I do think because I think this is going to answer a question I just saw pop up, because I tagged all my posts as mystery, suspense, serialization, pre-publication. I think that I was getting some people who were interested in the serial aspect of it, like people who just enjoy serial fiction and were finding it that way. So that was a surprise. But I do think that, like, the mechanics of it, I was very pleased with. But I do think I have opportunities for improving the marketing of it for the next round.
Okay, couple more questions here, then we got to shut it down. And this is a great question, so I want to bring it up from Coyote. Sorry about that, Coyote. Coyote, thank you for correcting me on the pronunciation. She asked, how was native discoverability on Substack?
Yeah, I think that it was probably from those tags, tagging things as a serial. I imagine that's where the native discoverability came up.
Cool, cool.
And I'll also say, and this is another thing that I'm still kind of sorting through myself, is that because of the mechanism of Substack, you have a profile, like Maddie Dalrymple is my profile. And then I have 3 Substacks or publications under it. So I have Maddie Dalrymple profile, and then I have at C, which is what I call the serialization because I hadn't named it yet. I have the indie author, and I have From Expertise to Authority. So that was a little weird because one of those is not like the others. Like if somebody is reading my the indie author posts, I think many of those are going to be interested in my From Expertise to Authority posts and vice versa. But that's a different pool of people than the people who are reading my novel serialization. And I debated a little bit about actually spinning up a separate profile for the fiction, but that felt awkward too. And I did know that there were going to be a certain number of people who are podcast listeners who are going to want to read the serialization because I was talking about it on the podcast. But I think that's just a decision each person has to make. Like, how separate do you want those things to be? Or do you want one home, your profile where all those things are living?
Sure. Okay, that makes perfect sense. As we're coming down to time here, Maddie, I just want to ask you one final question, and that is, what advice would you leave authors who are considering embarking on a similar project? I imagine soliciting feedback from readers may not always lead to warm and fuzzies, but just curious.
Yeah, well, I would say keep it simple. So, like, maybe don't commit to providing images with all your posts if you don't want to. I would say go ahead and give it a try. If you feel kind of uncomfortable about it, maybe just only promote it to a small group of people. Promote it to the people who you know are going to be friendly to you, like even if that's just friends and family, because I think there's a real benefit to walking through the process in a safe way before you kind of open yourself up. But I do think you really have to commit to never arguing with the people who are giving you feedback, even if you disagree with it. If people are like nasty, I'm sure there's a way you can block them. Like, feel free to block people who are being unprofessional or just unkind. But just recognize that just as you can't stand by a reader and explain why you did something, you can't explain to a reviewer why you did something and expect them to say, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and do that." Yeah, I think that would be my advice. Try it in a safe environment if you're feeling a little uncomfortable about putting your work out there, and just see how it goes. You might have a super pleasant experience like I did.
Yeah, noted. I think that's great advice. And again, everybody, I would just encourage you to look at ways, whether it's serialization or other methods of just creating those closer relationships with your readers, because that is a superpower over other authors who are just putting up books and hoping for the best. Hoping for the best isn't going to do it. So get out there, interact with those readers, and create those close relationships. For authors, or for all of you who want to know more about Maddie, you can go to her website, which is maddiedalrymple.com. Or if you want to learn more about self-publishing best practices, visit theindieauthor.com. And from both of those websites, Maddie, are just Maddie Dalrymple, that they could navigate to the Substack as well?
They can. It's a little buried, I have to say. There's another like marketing improvement I should make next time. But if you go to Substack and search for Maddie Dalrymple, then you will find all my publications. And of course, I would love it if people would check out the serial at Sea.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And Maddie, we certainly appreciate your time. We know you're a busy lady. You're doing a lot of things out there in addition to your writing. For those of you who joined us today, we just want to say thank you. We really appreciate you guys joining us week in and week out. As I always say every week, I saw some familiar names, so thank you, you guys. And I also saw some new names joining this conversation, so we appreciate you. Welcome. If you could do us a favor and share this episode with your author friends out there, we appreciate that, because that helps us attract and retain guests, experts like Maddie. You can bookmark d2dlive.com. Did you guys know that? So that you can see future events, future guests, future topics that we have on the calendar. And finally, if you are investigating self-publishing, perhaps for the very first time, why not go to drafttodigital.com and sign up for your account today? So once again, Maddie, thank you so much. If you have a minute or two, hang out in the green room. We'll grab a drink and a snack, and we'll discuss the episode. For everybody else, you guys, once again, thank you so much. We appreciate each and every single one of you. We hope to see you here again next week. We're going to be talking with another friend of the podcast, Dale Roberts. We're going to talk about best practices of creating YouTube channels. So we hope to see you again next week, everybody. Take care. And bye-bye.
Ebooks are great, but there's nothing quite like holding your own print book in your hand. It's a beautiful celebration of your writing accomplishment. That's why we've created D2D Print, a convenient and easy print-on-demand service built to make it easy for you. We've got more than 20 beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your book cover into a machine-perfect full wraparound cover for print. Yet another convenient option for you and your books. And you can get started right now at draftdigital.com.